Nathan, can you do the honours, please?
Martin Va, agus Fáilte, good morning and welcome. And welcome to board members and staff, and especially to members of the public and the press who are joining us virtually today to observe the meeting. So just so everybody's aware, you should have seen on your screen that this meeting is being recorded so that it can be uploaded to our website in the future. And I'd also like to remind everybody to use the show hands facility if you would like to come in with a question or a comment rather than the chat. It's lovely to see faces, so if your Wi-Fi can support your camera being on while you're speaking, that's lovely. And if everybody can remember to stay on mute when you're not contributing, that's really helpful to reduce the background noise. Just before we begin with our agenda this morning, I'd like to extend the board's congratulations to Gareth Adkins, who is here with us today. Gareth is taking up the role of Director of People and Culture on the 10th of July, and he's joining us from NHS Golden Jubilee. He's been there since 2018, currently as the Executive Director for Strategy, Planning and Performance. So, as I said, Gareth is here observing today, and it's a really good opportunity to welcome him to the board and to the role. He's in Helensburgh, and we very much look forward to working with you soon, Gareth, and it's lovely to see you here today. I also just wanted to say, obviously this is my first meeting in the chair, and I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to everybody, all my colleagues who've supported me as I've transitioned into this new role. It's been really lovely. I've felt really well supported, so I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for that. Okay, let's go on to our agenda. So first of all, Ruth, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Sarah. We have notification from Gaynor Roger that she will be a little bit late this morning. And we've also received an apology from Brian Williams from University of Highlands and Islands for today's meeting.
Great, Ruth. Okay, does anybody have any declarations of conflicts of interest that they wish to make? Alistair.
Yes, thank you and good morning, everyone. I had considered making a declaration of interest in my capacity as General Manager of Inverness, Badenoch and Strathspey Citizens Advice Bureau and as a Highland Councillor, but having applied the objective test and looking at the items under discussion on the agenda and my connection to those items, I feel I don't need to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so we shall move on. So agenda item 1.3, this is the minute of our previous meeting. Just to note, on the agenda it does say 31st of March, but it was the 28th of March that we had that last meeting, but it is correct on the actual minute. So first of all, I'll just pause to see if anybody wishes to raise any matters of accuracy, any corrections we need to make. No, okay, so are members happy to approve those minutes as an accurate record of our meeting? Great, okay, they're approved. That takes us on now to the action plan, which is in Excel format. So we have a couple of actions on here which are actually coming to us to the meeting today. So I am working on the assumption that they can be closed off because we've got them coming to the board today. Is that how we would like to do it, Ruth, or do we want to wait until the next one just to make sure that members have approved those reports and close them off at the next meeting?
Well, I'm very much in your hands, Sarah, on this one. We would usually wipe them off the action plan as they're completed, but this is entirely in your hands.
So shall we say then that they're coming into our agenda today for us approval? So is everybody happy that we can close off? So it would be number 2 and number 4. So number 2 was the maternity business case, which we obviously have as a substantive item on our agenda a little bit later on. And the corporate risk register, this was to do with some clearer representation using some colours, and that has been included in the report. So are members happy that we close off actions 2 and 4? Great. And then the only other thing I wanted to pick up on the action plan, just wait and see if nobody else has got any hands up. It was just something to take offline. Action number 3, I think we just need to add in a due date around that for a future version. but I'm happy if any other members have any questions or comments. Okay, so we're being asked to note the action plan. We're happy to do that. Great. Okay, that takes us on to matters arising. Does anybody have any matters arising that they wish to raise from the previous minutes or otherwise? Not seeing any hands up. So I shall move us swiftly on to agenda item number 2. I'm going to invite Pam in to give us her Chief Officer's verbal update on emerging issues. So I'll hand over to you now, Pam.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Sarah. A few things that I want to draw to the board's attention. Some are actually really positive, not so much emerging issues, and then I'll finish off with the kind of perhaps emerging issues or issues that we're familiar with that we probably want to pay tribute to. So the first item that I want to just draw to the board's attention is that for some time we had been speaking with Boyd as chair about the strategy and how we keep the strategy live and how we bring it to the fore. And so the team had been working on that. And given that from tomorrow it's Patient Participation Week, that was considered to be a positive time to try and I guess bring this to the fore and to raise awareness again of the strategy and to seek to do further engagement in different ways. So a video has been produced and will trail throughout the week. There's an Ask Me Anything session on Friday with staff being given the option to come into that. And the launch of a trial of a Highland 100 panel. So a plea for people across the patch to join a panel of engagement. So it'll be interesting to see how that lands. Another novel way of us trying to go about engagement. There are so many different ways that we need to do that so that we reach as many people as possible. But I think, you know, from a board perspective and in terms of keeping our strategy alive and keeping that feedback loop, it's important that we do this week. So was just to make people aware of that. And David's team and Ruth Fry have been central to bringing that to the fore. The second item I want to just again draw people's attention to is that from a staff wellbeing welfare perspective, we have been trialling out the Project Wingman bus across the patch. So this was a charity that actually emerged out of COVID. If people might recall that when COVID started, most of the airlines were grounded, and therefore there was a kind of project around the airline crews went to their nearest hospitals and set up first class lounges for to support staff and their well-being. Now, we didn't really get the kind of benefit of that here in Highland to the same degree, or in Argyll and Bute, and partly with the North Highland end of things, that was because Inverness didn't have the crews to deploy to us, but other health boards did engage in it. However, that's now become a charity that trusts in England and some health boards in Scotland have engaged in. So through endowments we have progressed a trial of that Project Wingman double-decker bus that's all set up with welfare advice and support and massage chairs, all sorts of things. And it was in Caithness the week before last. There was 135 staff went through that with really, really positive feedback. And but probably more importantly is the opportunity to speak with staff about what it means for them, what in that experience we could replicate on a more kind of sustained basis. You know, what is it that we can do? So a lot to learn from this. Last week on Raigmore, and it's there for the next 2 weeks, then it goes to New Craigs, and I was over, and the staff that came over, and we had a variety of different staff, from whether that be from the domestics or catering, whether that be medics, whether that be nursing staff from the teams or AHPs. There was actually quite a diversity in staff that had arrived, and I tried to do a bit of promotion on my vblog last week, but certainly the response was very positive from the staff that I met when I was there. And again, we'll just gather people's thoughts. It then moves down to Fort William and then on to Argyll and Bute, to a few locations there. Obviously replicating that across Highland for every team that's a challenge, and part of the test of this is to understand what staff want, what helps them, and how we can think about that within the geography that we serve, which is much more challenged. So really positive, and staff saying that they went back to their very pressured workplace feeling decompressed, which of course is absolutely what we would want and something we want to understand. So again, if you're in the Inverness area as board members, you may want to go and have a look at the buses at the back of Rigmore. The third thing I wanted to draw to your attention was that we had Marie Todd, the Minister for Social Work, Mental Wellbeing and Sports, on Friday, looking at our Green Theatres initiative, and Gaynor was there as our champion for that from the board. And that visit was headed up by Dr. Kenneth Barker, who is actually the National Clinical Lead at the Centre for Sustainable Delivery on Green Theatre. So again, really good looking at, you know, the work that we're leading on in terms of that space, but also the influence that we have nationally. And of course, for climate and sustainability and carbon footprint, that's really important. So I thought that was excellent that we had that visit. And again, that profile was being highlighted. I'm getting there, I promise. The last thing I probably want to talk a bit about is just obviously the pressures continue to be sustained. The attendances through A&E continue to be significant, and the system and the pressures that our staff are working within, whether that be in primary care, social care, right across our community services as well as our acute sector, remain significant. And the national conversations around how we calibrate this system continue, and we've had some really good starting to have a really good look at the planned care and what might be possible there, but still trying to understand that. But unscheduled care is going to be the next area of focus nationally, and obviously that's a huge focus for us locally, and hopefully in the weeks and months to coming forward, you'll start to see some significant plans around that. We've also got to quite a strong focus, as you know, around winter planning at as early a point as possible, because it never really feels like it eases, but we want to make sure that we continue to fare as well as possible, and again for our staff's sake and our patients' sake. So that those conversations and those deep dives into understanding what else, both nationally, regionally and locally, we can do to try and change things and recalibrate the system. So it was really just to draw that to your attention as well. So I think that is probably the main things I wanted to speak to. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Pam. Okay, so a good mix of positive and challenges there for us to consider. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Pam? I'll bring in Anne, please.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the update, Pam. It's not, well, might be a question at the end, I'm not sure, but I just really wanted to take this opportunity as you were talking about the wingman bus and the challenges that we have in ensuring that all of our staff have access to wellbeing opportunities, to give the board a little bit of feedback from a meeting that I attended last week with one of the area clinical forum committees, our professional committee for social work and social care. And I think that brought home to me the challenges that we have of ensuring that our colleagues that work primarily in the community feel that their needs are well represented to the board. And so I was pleased to see, I can't remember where I saw mention of it, I'm afraid, but I'm pretty sure that I saw mention somewhere that we were considering developing an OPEL system for the community. And I think that would be very welcomed by the staff that certainly were present and that I spoke to in that meeting, who I guess were feeling that they were regularly working in what we call black conditions, but that was not perhaps as visible as the pressures on our colleagues in the hospitals. So I just wonder if it would be possible for somebody to say a little bit about how that might develop from a community perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll bring Pam in a minute, but we've definitely had significant discussions about how that would be extended, and I think there is absolutely something about a common language. There's absolutely something about the acknowledgement for people to see where things are, because the community is very invisible from a data perspective, and that's not unique to Highland. And so I think that there is absolutely something in that. But I'll bring in Pam, because we've had quite significant discussions about this, and there is definitely something about that parity and recognition. Pam?
Hi, I'm Pam Kim, and I'm the Interim Chief Officer for Highland Community. So yes, we've been developing an OPEL system for the community, and in particular including New Craig's Hospital and mental health services, given that New Craig's is our second biggest hospital. So we're working at pace to get that in place. And I guess one of the issues is that the community should be a pull system from the acute hospitals, but we've not really been able to work in that way. We've been working more in what would I describe as like a push system, when the acute hospitals push on to the rest of the system. So we need to balance that up and make sure that we understand the whole system, and that we try and balance the system in an ongoing way. So we've done some learning from Fife, as had the acute service when they put their OPEL in place, and we're just putting the finishing touches on agreeing the cards and the actions that need to be put in place for our escalations, and we should be finished that piece of work pretty soon. We've got a short life working group in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam and Pam. Okay, is that okay, Andy? Do you want to come back in on that at all? No, okay. I will bring in Graham next, please.
Good morning. Question for Pam, really about the lifting of the mask mandate across many across services, and I just wondered how that's been received, and particularly how perhaps more vulnerable patients are responding to that in A&E and so on. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. And yeah, a really good question. I've actually not been around for a few days. I had some leave, so I'm going to see if Louise can come in and give us an update from particularly a nursing perspective. Thanks.
Thanks. It's generally been really well received and people are quite relieved. However, there is still that understandable anxiety because we've had so long in masks, and there's a small number of areas that are continuing to use masks in higher risk situations, as the legislation supports us to do. So we are very closely monitoring that to avoid us ending up in masks by default and only having them in the areas where we actually need them. We are finding that the patients are generally comfortable, although again there's some anxieties, and we are still providing masks for patients as they come into the hospital should they wish to use them. So we're allowing that flexibility and supporting that flexibility going forward, because there's obviously going to be people that are going to be anxious still, and it's going to take a little time to work through. There's variability in different areas. I've heard feedback from some areas that are a little bit more cautious than others. However, understandably, we've got a situation where we've got to follow the policy, the national policy. We've got to get that in place, but we've got to do it sensitively.
Thanks, Louise. I've got Alex.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I was in Rigmore outpatients clinic on Friday, and the only people that were wearing masks that I saw, and I was about quite a bit on the bottom floor, moving from different bits to different bits, was some of the elderly patients that were in there. You never saw a member of staff wearing a mask at all. So clearly that message is getting through. The other thing that I noticed and I filled in, do you remember we had a discussion in the strategy, one of the strategy away days, about patient experience, and I actually saw and filled in the patient experience bit that was there using my phone. One of the older ladies that was there went, "What are you doing, son?" And I says, "I'm filling in." "How do you do that?" So I walked her through it, but of course she'd no phone. So we're going to have to think about how we improve that, but at least it's there and we're using it. Cheers.
Thanks, Alex. That's some really good on the ground feedback. I'll bring in Katrina next.
I suppose giving a personal perspective from a sort of contracted services point of view, the feedback has been overwhelmingly very positive from patients with regards to being able to see your whole face and actually have a better interaction. And those that are hard of hearing are eternally grateful for this, I have to say. It is a huge difference to people in that group, and it's a significant group. So I think generally there are still a number of patients wearing masks, and as long as they are made to feel comfortable doing so, then I think it's probably the right direction of travel at this time. After 3 years of being masked up, I have to say personally I'm very relieved. So yeah.
Thanks, Katrina. And Tim, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I certainly support the changes to mask wearing, and I think it's a very useful and important thing to do. I think two things though to bear in mind. One is that masks are for COVID are generally beneficial because they stop somebody spreading COVID rather than actually somebody picking up COVID. So with that in mind, if there are vulnerable people who would prefer staff to wear masks, then I think that we do need to be aware to support that if they're worried about themselves getting infected, because them wearing a mask probably won't make that much difference. But secondly, also, we need to remember good sort of occupational hygiene, and if people do have symptoms, then they need to take appropriate precautions, which may very well be not coming into work, because it's masks aren't a panacea either. So it's just getting getting back to what we used to do, but doing it properly and making sure that we are sympathetic to the needs around us.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, that's very well put. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments for Pam on her update. So thank you, Pam. It's really good to hear what's happening at the moment. So I'm very pleased to move us on to item number 3 on our agenda. And this is a positive piece. So this is our National Treatment Centre update. Obviously, this is a long piece of work, and we've had lots of progress updates over recent months on the development of the centre. I'm really delighted that it welcomed its first patients on the 17th of April. So we have a report before us this morning, which is giving us an update since that kind of go live date, and we're being invited to take substantial assurance. Now we've got Catherine Sutton with us, who I think is going to open the item in a moment, but I'm also really delighted to welcome some other colleagues with us this morning who are going to give us a presentation on the recent success of the centre. So I hope we have with us Colin McNair, Helen Robertson and Fiona Grist. Hopefully they are with us today. So I am now going to hand over, I'm not sure if it's Catherine or if it's Helen that's going to open, but I shall hand over to whoever's opening that item for us now, please.
I'm happy just to come in and introduce Sarah. Thank you very much. And delighted that we have our senior leaders for the National Treatment Centre on the call. Absolutely delighted as the Director for Acute Services to let the board know how the positives that we've experienced since opening the National Treatment Centre, and colleagues will explain some of the detail to that shortly. This has been a really good success story for our NHS Highland population and our board area, and this is a fabulous way that we are building capacity, and you will see some of that as we come on to the IPQR report later in the meeting. But without stealing anybody's thunder, I will hand over to Helen, who will present to you and give you the detail in terms of how the National Treatment Centre has been progressing. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Sarah. So my name is Helen Roberts, and I'm the National Treatment Centre Manager. I have with me Fiona.
Fiona Grist, I'm the Clinical Nurse Manager for the National Treatment Centre.
And we've also got...
I'm Colin McNair. I'm an orthopaedic consultant and also the Clinical Director for the National Treatment Centre.
Can you see our presentation? We're sort of doing a triple act here.
So we can see it. It's not in slide view yet. We can still see the slides down the side, but we have got it on our screens, which is good.
Excellent.
That's great. That's it in slide view now, yeah.
So what we wanted to do was really to give you a brief overview of where we landed within the NTC and where we are at 6 weeks down the line. So in terms of our construction completion and handover was achieved on the 31st of March. That involved a significant amount of work from a huge number of people. We achieved NHS Assure status, as I say, before the 31st of March, so that was excellent. And our project was completed on budget at 48.6 million. We had quite a complex transition and mobilisation period prior to opening and once we were open. Our first patients were seen on the 17th of April this year, and during our initial operation period, we took a gradual phased approach to our clinical activities. That was to allow us to step down the ophthalmology activity within Raigmore so that we could actually move the whole service across into the NTC and then get used to the building and actually start to run business as usual. Taking that gradual phased approach allowed us to really test our pathways and make sure that our pathways and our equipment were all absolutely working as they should be. So we're into what we call now the business as usual and defects period. We have a building users group established, so we meet fortnightly to collate any building issues, to resolve those where we can and to escalate them where we can't. We have a daily management and daily debrief approach in place, so that's attended by all members of the team, of the senior team. And again, we take that real-time approach to actually resolving any issues, and that's been quite successful and has kept us on track. We have Balfour Beatty and our NEC supervisor on site, and that's really to support any building snagging issues. And we've had a few, not any major ones, but we have had a few snagging issues that we've worked through. Where we got to with our recruitment, as you may recall, we required an additional 208 staff to run the building. That's not just to work within the building, it's all the support services around functioning within the building. And we've recruited, I'm pleased to say, 93% of the total that we needed to recruit to. We're still actively recruiting for some of our ophthalmology consultant posts, anaesthetic consultant posts, and some of our perioperative roles. The support services roles, as you may recall, were quite a challenge to recruit to, but we're fully staffed with all of our support service roles. I'm going to pass on to Fiona now.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So back in 2021, through an appreciative inquiry led by Jill McVicker, they came up with the people plan, and this is very much focused around how we work our day-to-day business. This includes all of our staff, the whole multidisciplinary team. So everything from our nurses on the ward, our OTs, physios, support staff, facilities, management, catering staff, is everybody. We're very much of a team here in the National Treatment Centre. How we work on a day-to-day basis, you can see here, is focused on our culture, our people, and empowering our people. So prior to us moving in, we focused heavily on the education amongst everybody. And I'm really proud to say that we achieved well over 90% of all staff completing their statutory mandatory training. And in fact, we're over 95% in some of the departments as well. And that also includes our PDPs, our personal development plans for staff that are reported on annually. We're also trying to encourage the staff to do these sort of 6-monthly to support the teams and encourage them in areas that may need improvement on, or in areas they wish to discuss, I can't speak this morning, to develop their own careers. So we very much focus on kindness and civility, pulling in our human factors, and that has been key for some of our staff here. People are taking on the role of civility matters champions and stepping up to challenge behaviours that are not acceptable in the environment we're working in. So it's key on a day-to-day basis. People have felt that they haven't been able to challenge in the past. They're now questioning people on their behaviours, asking them why they're here, what's important to you. So at the basis of this is our patients and staff, and that's the key focus for us here in the National Treatment Centre. Thank you.
Okay, I get to present the results part, which is good to show off. I think first of all, we should probably say there's a big thank you to the ophthalmology teams, because as you can see at the start of these graphs, they were bridging 2 sites. So there was a lot of emergency work still happening over in the Regmore site while we were bringing the operational side of the building online here. So I'd like to take a moment just to thank the ophthalmology team for the work they've done there. This first slide, orange, is what we've actually delivered, and blue is what we plan to deliver at 75% theatre efficiency. So the reason we planned at 75% was, as Helen said, with a 7-week phasing in period. So as you can see, this chart's for non-cataract eye surgery, so we're achieving more than we'd set out to. Again, not to dwell too long on it, the cataracts were above where we'd planned for the phasing period. These are lower limb joints, so for the 16th of May we've delivered 108 joints, and that's to patients both in NHS Highland and NHS Grampian. So we're well ahead of the curve there as well. So I think we should say thanks to NHS Grampian and have that minuted as well, because they've really come out of the traps with all cylinders firing, because they've done a lot of work in getting their patients to us, pre-operatively assessed and chosen the appropriate patients. So I'm delighted that partnership working across both health boards is working well. So not only is it a totality of joints we're delivering, we're looking at the quality here, and this slide shows that we're doing well in terms of our enhanced recovery pathways. So we've had a number of patients, mainly hips, some knees in there, that have got home in the actual day of surgery, which is something we weren't doing in NHS Highland until within the last 6 to 9 months. We started off in Regmore, so that should be noted as well, that this process began in Regmore before we became operational here, this ERAS, and looking for day 0 discharges. Majority of our patients are joint patients who come home in the day after surgery, so 1 night stays. So I think the team have to be congratulated on that. Moving forward, we plan to upscale our ophthalmology service delivery by September and have the 2.6 ophthalmology theatres running then. We've already received our quota from the Scottish Government, how many cataracts from NHS Grampian we're going to treat in the first year of operation. Next week, we start our foot and ankle and hand surgery, so that accounts for the other 0.4 of theatres that people may ask about. So in the ground floor, there's 3 theatres, so 2.6 of that provision a week is for ophthalmology, and 0.4 of it is for hands. And by the time we get into quarter 3 and 4, we plan to move up from 75 to 85% efficiency levels. So stop sharing there, and sure, we're happy to take questions if anyone has got anything to ask.
Thank you. That was Fantastic presentation, really positive and really inspiring. I'm glad you explained, Colin, what the 0.4 theatre was, because that was going to be a question that I asked, so that is good to get that out of the way. And so yeah, lots of things to commend here, but I'm going to invite colleagues in because people will have comments and questions as well. So I'm going to bring in Bert first, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone for that presentation. Very, very positive, very encouraging, and we appreciate all of the work that has been taking place to get us to this point. I was particularly interested in the description of the work being done around culture, and I think there's been some very positive steps there, and in some of my next visits to the board area, I would really like to come to the NTC and just learn a little bit more about your work in relation to culture. The 93% recruitment figure, I think, is excellent. A lot of good work being done to reach that figure, I'm sure. I've spoken in the past about the impact on recruitment from within other areas of NHS Highland, and I'm wondering if you're able to give us any breakdown on the percentage of recruitment from within and the percentage of recruitment from out with. My interest being, of course, on the impact of staffing elsewhere in the board area for recruitment from within. And finally, we've been speaking quite a bit about corporate induction over the past number of months, and I wonder if you're able to tell me if all of those recruited from out with the board area have undergone a corporate induction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bert. So if I take those questions, so I think the first one was around culture, really, and we would be delighted for you to come and visit us, and we'll show you around the building, and you can talk to members of staff, and in particular talking to our civility and kindness champions, I think would be really worthwhile for you. In terms of recruitment, as I say, we've recruited 93%. The figures are about 40% for NHS Highland staff who've actually applied for jobs and been successful within the NTC. We actually started our recruitment process 2 years out. So what we said from the outset was that people that we recruited would be supernumerary for the time that they were held almost within Raigmore prior to coming across to the NTC. So it boosted some of the issues within the existing service, but undoubtedly there has been an impact, and people, as I say, can choose to apply to different roles. We've been really successful in terms of the more difficult to fill posts, and quite interesting posts where we've actually recruited from down south. So our pharmacy post is a person moving up from the south of England. We've recruited a nurse from Australia. We actually brought across nurses from Zambia as a test pilot within the NTC, and again sort of have attracted people from the Central Belt and across Scotland and England. I think really we had to be quite aggressive in our approach in terms of recruitment, so we used Muckle Media. We had our Aim High, Aim Highland campaign. That actually helped and supported, I think, the wider recruitment once we were able to get up and running. So it supported the recruitment for posts across Highland. And I think when we look at the workforce figures, you can see that the workforce trend is upwards once we started to implement Aim High, Aim Highland. We had people on buses, we had people on, not themselves, but photographs of them on buses and tube stations and all sorts. So we tried every trick that we could to recruit staff. Induction was the other one. So we actually had, in terms of our induction process, we actually had an induction process within the NTC prior to moving in the building. So we had dedicated sessions where we brought every member of staff into the building, well, not into the building, into a session to talk about the actual building, the culture that we were wanting to build, all of our processes and so on. And that was then backed up with a building induction process and introduction to all of NHS Highland's policies and procedures. hope that answers all the questions. I'm not sure if I picked all of them up there.
Bert's giving a thumbs up, so he's happy with that. And I suppose just before I bring Philip in to build on that, really good to hear about the success around your training and PDPs and that kind of cycle of work that's really important for us to do. And I think going forward, it's a great opportunity for us to take some learning from that and try and spread that across the organisation, because there's clearly some good learning to be had from that. Okay, I've got Philip next, please.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the presentation. It's an excellent facility. Bert's actually touched on two of the areas there that I was going to mention, which was the civility matters and the recruitment. So just for re-emphasis, the civility matters is incredible piece of work, and it's really gratifying to see that you're making such positive use of it in the treatment centre, and it'll be really interesting to see how that's applied on a day-to-day basis. So just wanted to re-emphasise the interest that I have and the board with that. The other aspect was recruitment, which Bert covered, but just in terms of the ophthalmology, which you're making a huge amount of progress with, I think you were looking to have the department fully staffed by the end of September or September. Is that achievable?
I think it's achievable, but it's not without challenge. And we know that ophthalmology consultants are quite a rare breed across the country, really across the whole UK. But again, we'll be quite aggressive in terms of our approach to our recruitment that's currently ongoing. But also, I think now that we're open and we're up and running and people can see what an amazing facility we actually have, I think it speaks for itself. It will start to really attract people. And I think the other benefit of being on the campus site are those links that we can make with the Innovation Centre, with UHI, with HIE. They've already been across to visit with us. We've been to visit them. We had a team from Spain who've been across to visit us. So there's huge interest within the building, and people are really keen to start to make those slightly different links. But I think those will be links that will be attractive to other members of staff. So hopefully that will start to generate that improvement or that increase in recruitment numbers. So we are hopeful that we can have everything up and running by September. But as I say, it won't be without challenge.
Thanks.
Thank you, Helen. I've got Alistair next, followed by Alex. Alistair.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It was very useful and informative. I'd like to hear a bit about how you've managed to achieve the high compliance with training. Sarah touched on it. It'd be good to get, were you doing that at the beginning of the day, the end of the day, because that's quite a spectacular result in terms of the training. And also, anecdotally, what is the feedback from patients that have been using the service? Are you capturing the sort of the feedback and the experiences that they have gone through as well? Thank you.
Do you want to pick up on those?
Yeah, so on the training front, we were able to utilise some space in the Anne Loughran building where we were working from prior to moving into the NTC. And along with the support from our clinical nurse educator and the team leads within each area, we were doing teaching sessions within Anne Loughran. We had our theatre and ward staff predominantly transitioned across in January, so we were able to use that time for getting people up to speed with all their training and getting to know each other as teams as well. And that's something that's been really evident here, as almost like cross-pollination, if you like, the teams all working together and getting to know each other. So we used that time then for the training aspects.
Okay, and to pick up around the patient feedback has been really positive verbally. I think we had a few minor comments around signage, but we've worked on the signage around the campus and that very much is resolving. But in terms of the building, I had one quote from a person walking around who said, as somebody who gets white coat anxiety, they just felt the building was really calm, really supportive. They didn't feel anxious at all. And staff were getting lots of lovely cards, lots of compliments. I think our complaints anecdotally are certainly fewer in terms of ophthalmology, so we've noticed a bit of a difference there. What we would like to do is a formal process. We're 6 weeks down the line. I think at 12 weeks, what we would like to do is a retrospective, contacting all of our patients and doing a formal piece of work, but we want to link with the research and development and clinical governance team to do that piece of work.
Thank you. That sounds very interesting. We'll be keen to see how that progresses. I'm going to bring Alex in next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the presentation, folks. One of the things in the paper that struck me quite interesting was this issue about the limited mobile phone coverage through the building. Is that an inconvenience, or is that causing an operational issue for yourselves? And Colin, when we went round your building, you were mentioning the target of 8 joints a day. Is that still the target? Are you going to exceed that, or are you going to? When are you going to get to the 8 joints a day? Thanks.
I'll let Fiona answer first about the comms part, because she's did a piece of work which was really useful in terms of standardising our 222 emergency call work to get around the mobile phone. So, and then Fiona will pass me back to me.
So yeah, with the mobile system, we identified quite early on that the pager system wouldn't work within the building. So that led to quite a bit of concern about how we'd notify any emergency response. As you know, we are a standalone unit. So on the back of that, all nursing staff were trained to EILS level, just the one up from basic life support. So we could kind of support ourselves if an emergency occurred. We've also got our advanced nurse practitioners and our clinical development fellows. So the AMPs and the clinical development fellows will take the lead in the event of an emergency. So on identifying that the pagers wouldn't work, we had to come up with another system, and we've actually got our handheld phones, so, you know, phones, but the mobile ones. We identified 2 of them. So the AMP carries one through the day and the CDF at night, or a third anaesthetist during the day. And then we looked at a system as to how we could notify the staff via these phones. And it worked, but it was quite complex, and it involved putting a few numbers in. But actually the team and the telephony department have been fantastic. We now are able to dial 2222, the same as Rigmore staff. So anybody that's come across to us knows the system. If we dial 2222, clearly state where we are in the National Treatment Centre, what the emergency is, the telephony team will then activate that system for us out to the phones here. So it's worked really well as a system. So that coverage is working, and it works throughout the building. With regards to sort of mobile phone, if you log into the patient Wi-Fi service when you come into the building, you can pretty much pick up mobile phone service throughout the building. So that's helped alleviate some of these issues. But certainly from the emergency response side of things, it's worked really well with this network that we've set up.
Yep, thanks, Fiona. The 8 joint a day lists commenced a fortnight ago. They're part of the norm now, I'm glad to say, and it seemed that our phasing plan worked. The surgeons have integrated well with the theatre teams, and as we know, it's what it says in the tin here, it's high volume, low complexity. So I'm pleased to report we've had very little in the way of overruns, if any. There is scope to move beyond 4 joints, but that would be a big effort in terms of limitations in childcare provision within the Highland area, all these factors. So we are comfortably delivering 4 joints in both theatres at the moment. But it's a wider discussion as to how if we move to 5 joints. And that is a concept that is established in other parts of the UK, I wouldn't say Scotland, but it requires integration with some factors that are probably out with NHS Highland's control. Childcare being the main rate limiting step, because as I believe, I don't think there's any childcare provision Inverness with hours of 8 AM to 6 PM.
Thank you. And before I bring Pam in, can I just ask a follow-up question with regards to the mobile phone signal? I mean, clearly, you know, what you were saying, Fiona, about the Wi-Fi usage, and that's great. I suppose I was thinking a bit wider than that, given the size of the campus, you know, area and the other buildings that are in the area. And granted, they will all have their own Wi-Fi which they're utilising, but I'm just thinking about that wider space and how helpful better mobile phone coverage would be in that area. Are there opportunities to work with our partners on that site to kind of push for that to be addressed more widely?
There are, but I think, Sarah, the issue is the construction type of the building. So the fact that it's big concrete slabs, that's restricted the signal. I think out west is actually a good connection when you move outside the building, but we've not had any complaints, and everything is working in terms of emergency procedures and so on. We're absolutely comfortable that that's working well within the building.
Okay, the netcall thing was something that our head of IT, Ian Ross, was keen that technology is available in other facilities throughout NHS Highland, and what Fiona was referring to in the 2222 emergency call, that's been affected by netcall. So apparently we have this technology available and it's underutilised. So Ian Ross, our head of IT, wants to try and replicate that at some other NHS Highland sites.
It's called Liberty Netcall System, the name of it.
That's great, thank you. Pam, I'd like to bring you in next, please.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, I'd just like to commend the team. I mean, the journey to this, a huge amount of planning, precision planning, and I suspect what you see is in terms of performance and what you've laid out today as a team is as a result of just the detail and the time and the effort that's gone into that. And it's absolutely fantastic, and to see the kind of outperforming the plan is excellent. And I think, you know, nationally, when we were looking at things last week, I mean, we do stand out, as you would expect with a performance like this, and already are standing out in terms of what's possible. And I think there's so much connected in this. You've touched on the culture, you've touched on the standards, the quality, and what that does to motivate the motivations of your team, etc. And I think that just comes over in spades. And of course, this is the kind of report you'd want to see everywhere across our system. I don't think, however, you can compare apples with apples, but I think there is a huge amount of learning here in terms of some of the people planning, the approaches that you've taken. And the other bit, I think we've been having a discussion with as chief execs, and probably something that I want to pursue further here is, clearly as a cold site, you haven't got the interruptions. That allows you to be, you know, much more kind of organised in what you're doing. And whilst we can't create a separate cold site, you know, for the rest of our surgical programme, there is probably something about how do you adopt the principles then, because to get out of the situation we're in, we're going to have to draw some lines in terms of how we operate and have some change in and around that. And I'm just interested in, Colin, particularly you, as a surgeon, you know, what your thoughts are and views are around that, whether that's silly to think that way or whether there is something there that we should be pursuing as a board.
I think we should. I mean, very early in the COVID pandemic, I mean, I can speak as an orthopaedic surgeon. The British Orthopaedic Association drew up sort of guidelines in terms of different sites, what they would classify them. So we would be a green site here, that we're completely insulated if there was a further pandemic, etc. So that there's no mixed economy here. But I think moving forward, is that just ring fencing surgical facilities, dare I say it, beds. It's not just beds, it's everything that goes along with it, the staff as well, patients. There's no getting away from that. And I think that's what really generates a lot of angst amongst the teams, whether it's the surgeons, the nurses, the advanced nurse practitioners, the delivering surgical services, is really making sure that elective services aren't always perceived as second class to unscheduled care, and I know that's a sort of emotive area, but these concepts are well established in terms of elective surgery in green sites. So that's something I think we should aspire to as a board moving forward, is to some way identify that. We've seen other health boards as sort of ring fencing areas for elective surgery, and they've performed well, but it's always the seesaw, I suppose, in terms of when you're on a mixed economy site, balancing your elective delivery with your unscheduled care.
Thanks, Colin. Okay, so colleagues have had an opportunity to ask you some really interesting questions, and obviously we've touched on a range of positive aspects from your presentation. I'm sure we could probably talk about it all day, but it's really good to hear some of those thoughts. And just before I round it off, I just wanted to also comment on something that Colin mentioned in your section of the presentation, Colin, which was around that that good partnership working with our colleagues in Grampian, which I think is really good. Obviously, it is a national treatment centre, and that is important, but it's important for us more broadly as well. So it's really good to hear that element in your presentation too. So I'm not seeing any further hands up. So just to recap, we are being asked to take substantial assurance from the report and note our colleagues' presentation. And I'm assuming that everybody is happy to take that substantial assurance. Great, that's a thumbs up from members. That's really good. So thank you all again, Fiona, Helen, Colin. Thank you so much for coming and presenting this to us. Really delighted to hear it, and look forward to hearing about progress in the future.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Hey, we've got all our big items at the front here. We're front loading this meeting. So next up, we have another substantial item to discuss. So I'm taking us on to item number 4 on our agenda, and that is our maternity and neonatal business case. And I'd like to invite Catherine to speak to this paper, please. So over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair, very much, and I'm very pleased to be with the board today to bring forward our business case for maternity and neonatal services. I just want to introduce the team as well that we have on the call today, and we're all going to contribute in part to this. Obviously, you're very familiar with Alan, who's been a significant contributor in terms of us developing our business case. Isla Barton, who is our Director of Midwifery and recently joined the board in December last year. Tracy Gervais, who has been with us for not quite 12 months and has worked diligently away since coming into the board last March around this particular agenda. And Rashmi Srivastava, who is our Clinical Director for the Women and Children's Directorate. So in terms of the business case, if I could introduce it, Sarah, you have in front of you a significant weighty tome. And my apologies for that, but this has been a very complex area of development, and I think it was important for the board to be to have all information to hand to inform them as we bring forward this business case to you for your consideration. There is a supporting SBAR as well that aims to describe some of the route that we've taken to get from where we were, what the purpose of this is, and the importance of it. I think it's fair to say, and hopefully we recognise that as a board, we have been on a journey of improving maternity and neonatal services for some time now. There has been the Best Start policy, and colleagues that have now left the board have been working diligently under the leadership of our previous Director of Nursing to improve services in this area. You'll also be aware, as a part of developing situation in Moray, that there have been challenges with the delivery of maternity services in the Moray area, and NHS Grampian and NHS Highland have been working together to understand how we could work to support one another to deliver the best services for not only our own Highland population, but also for services that are based in Moray. On that journey, we have recognised that there is a significant requirement for investment in maternity and neonatal services, particularly in relation to the workforce side of the team and the effort that goes on in there. And you will see in the business case that there is a requirement for significant investment, particularly relating to medical and midwifery staff. And colleagues, as we go through the presentation, will explain that in a bit more detail. We also need to improve our facility. The facility within Raigmore is dated, and we also recognise that there was limited access to midwifery-led care within the local Inverness area. And the business case recommends and makes provision for an alongside unit that will allow us to improve the midwifery-led care that we're able to give mothers and the experience of birth and pregnancy. This is a really important business case for the board to consider, and it is with great respect that I bring this business case in front of the board today. This will set the direction for maternity services in Highland, and it's very important to understand that investment is required. And it is a key plank to the support of delivering maternity services to the Moray population as well. You will be aware that there have been a number of reports. A report that was brought by the Cabinet Secretary in 2021 in relation to Moray maternity services, and a further announcement through the then Health Secretary Humza Yousaf in December 2022 that recommended a networked service delivery model. Myself and my Chief Officer colleague from Moray work together and jointly chair a programme board that looks at joining up maternity services across the Grampian and Highland area to deliver services as locally as possible and in the best way. This programme of work, you will also note, has invested in really listening and understanding the significant concerns that have been raised over a number of months by our colleagues within the service, and it responds to that both in terms of how colleagues feel in terms of the delivery of service, but also in terms of the capacity that's required to deliver this service. I'd also like to note that to be successful in this space, similar to what we've just heard in relation to the National Treatment Centre, there will need to be detailed work relating to recruitment, particularly around our midwifery workforce. And we're already engaging with NES to look at how we can change training and development models to bring more opportunity for workforce generation and employment and pathways into service within the north area of Scotland, of which Highland is a significant part. So I'm going to hand over at this point to Tracy Gervais, who's Head of Women's and Children's Directorate, and she'll just take you through the next part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So certainly my role in the business case has included being the senior management lead on behalf of the Women and Child Health Directorate to commission and lead on the health needs assessment with a specific focus on pregnancy and birth, and also to contribute to the strategic case for change and policy landscape, which includes Health Board statutory responsibilities specific for babies, children and families, and to clarify and confirm the local plans and arrangements to respond and performance report against this. We have worked with clinical, operational and inter-board stakeholders to identify and agree how we pave the way forward in enabling access to a networked model of care, with the Maternity and Neonatal Services Programme Board being the governing and approval body, and also reporting to our executive level governance groups, for example, ECOG, and the Joint Programme Board with NHS Grampian. It's fair to say maternity and neonatal services continues to hold a high profile at a local, regional and national level. Policy landscape is complex and more than often not connected. The strategic business case explores the case for change and sets out the national and local policies and strategies which have informed the case for investment in maternity and neonatal services. And that includes Best Start, the Ockenden report, Getting It Right for Every Child, and our own annual delivery plan, to name but a few. To help ensure future maternity and neonatal services respond to Highland population, the Health Needs Assessment was completed in February of this year, draws on national and local data, in particular our BadgerNet data, which is our electronic patient record for maternity services. Key findings and recommendations are included in the business case, with prevention being a priority to support our pregnant mothers to adopt a healthier lifestyle and their families. The workforce profile proposed in the business case considers the health needs assessment findings and recommendations through creating service developments that focus on early intervention and prevention, which will help to reduce inequalities and improve population health across Highland. There are 3 elements of change in the business case: sustainable maternity and neonatal services, facilities modernisation, and midwifery-led care. All 3 directly respond to the lived experience of Highland women and families, the engagement work commissioned by the Programme Board last year. In addition, the elements of change will improve the lived experiences of Highland women and their families, improve staff experience and workforce recruitment and retention, and enable and support Health Board adherence to national and local policies and guidelines. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Rashmi, to take you forward in the business case. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Catherine. Sorry, I don't have a computer with a camera here up. I'm in Caithness right now, so linking in from here. So just to inform the board that yes, we are on a journey, and we just heard the national and the local landscape that we are tasked to deliver on. There are significant pressures on both pediatrics and gynecology as regards our routine as well as cancer waiting times, and we acknowledge that, and we are working very hard to try and optimize and rationalize our service provision. But we definitely want to see this business case through, because it will deliver on the Scottish Government direction to establish safe maternity pathways in Highland. Especially, it will create opportunity for us to extend care to our Moray population, which we all heard that we have to work to a networked model of care. It will also comply with Best Start and other policy and strategic drivers, which Tracy G just highlighted, along with refurbishing and upgrading the unit. It will create additional capacity, and we hope that this additional capacity will not only meet our local needs, but it will also allow us to extend support to the pathways that we are discussing for women in Moray. It will try and make best use of the locally available resources. So it has been a journey to try and set expectations and the vision for the unit, because we are working with, I think, a 20 or a 30-year-old establishment. It will also present additional opportunities relating to continuous improvement, which is much needed for the maternity and neonatal services for our patients and as well as for the workforce who work here. It will also provide a little bit more choice for a woman. As you just heard, that Inverness area doesn't have that midwifery led birth unit, and Caithness has a brand swank community midwife unit where I'm working out right now. So it does seem that it'll make it more equitable and increase choice for a woman. It'll enhance the maternity and neonatal pathways for Highland women and their families, using a value-based approach, which we are all committed to. We have been recently very successful in our consultant round recruitment with 3 whole-time equivalent consultants recruited. So it'll be fair to say that people are interested in coming to this region and work with us. This will also help address high locum costs within the workforce. And last but not the least, we have been very successfully engaging with our colleagues, clinical colleagues in Grampian, with clinical collaborative workshops and groups, and we are trashing out action plans, which we plan to implement going forwards. One of them would be, for instance, promoting outpatient induction of labor, which we did try during COVID, and again, we are trying to seek more momentum with that, trying to improve intrapartum care transfers and access to our services for intrapartum care, and trying to spell out all the granular details as to what the clinical pathways will look like going forwards are some of the actions that we are taking forward. With this, I will hand over to my colleague, Ayla Barton, who's our Director of Midwifery. And sorry, I couldn't show myself to you all, despite wearing a very summery dress. Thanks.
Thank you, Rashmi. Good morning. So the next part, I'm going to give an overview from a midwifery perspective. And as you've already heard, that focuses on 2 main aspects. There's the part round about the workforce, and there's a bit round about our opportunity to enhance our midwifery-led care here in Highland. So from a workforce perspective, there is a significant ask within the business case, and it's really it's twofold. There's something about enhancing our existing teams and giving us the opportunity to do that. And I suppose on that note, I'm delighted to be able to share that yesterday and today we're interviewing for 22 new qualified midwives who have applied to Highland, and that's a significant uplift from the last couple of years. So I'm really delighted to see that the student midwives are seeing us as a positive destination at the end of their training. So there's something about enhancing our staff midwife numbers. Within the business case, you'll see that there are a number of specialist roles. The focus of these roles was very much linked to the strategic needs assessment, which Tracy has outlined there in terms of the public health role of the midwife, which is really key, the prevention work. And when we looked at the data within the strategic health needs assessment, that very much aligns to the focus of these roles. So for example, from a public protection perspective, child protection, violence against women, when you look at our data, 20% of our women will disclose domestic violence within the antenatal period. What I would also say is that these roles very much will align Highland to the structures that you would find in any other mainland board in Scotland. These are roles that would be an expectation to have within maternity services. So there's that bit. So there's the bit about enhancing our teams, having the structure that's aligned with the needs assessment, bringing us into line with other boards within Scotland, and being able to provide a supportive environment for the newly qualified midwives. What we want is to have an attractive board to work in, an attractive career structure, the appropriate support, mentoring, preceptorship when they come into the profession, so that we can not only keep them within midwifery as a profession, but also keep them within Highland. So I think that's, from the workforce perspective, that's certainly where that comes from. And in order to be able to address some of the inequalities that we can see within the strategic needs assessment, The other part, which has also been mentioned this morning, is round about midwifery-led care. And we know through research that where there's high quality midwifery-led care in the antenatal period and the intrapartum period, so during labour, then there are less interventions for women and more women will have a normal birth. So thinking about that, again, that reflects some of the clinical educator roles, enhancing our establishment, the consultant midwifery posts that are within the business case to be able to offer that within Highland. And, you know, as Rashmi said, there has been and there is a bit of inequity in that we don't have midwifery-led facilities here in Inverness and the immediate surrounding area. I did lead on the options appraisal to look at what staff and also women and families, what their preferred option would be for that model. And it came out quite clearly that an alongside midwifery unit, which is a midwifery-led unit within the footprint of Raigmore, was the preferred option. And I think one of the real benefits to that, I've certainly worked in services that have had alongside midwifery units and freestanding units. I think one of the real benefits of an alongside unit is that you can offer that midwifery-led care to a wider range of women. We're not an outlier when we look at 75% of our women have some level of complexity in their clinical care. But what you can do with an alongside unit is you can think about the criteria and you can flex that a bit to make it more accessible for more women. So yeah, so as I say, that did come through very clearly in the needs in the options appraisal round about, you know, that was the preferred option, and certainly in my experience that would have been my preferred option too. So I was pleased with that. So really, that's the sort of two main parts from the midwifery perspective, and I will now hand over to Alan.
Thanks, Isla. So just from a building and infrastructure position, just to make the board clear the amount of work that's went into this, I think the work originally started in 2019. I think it was prior to myself coming into post, and I think we done a reset following a walk round with Pam and a couple of others to make sure we're getting maximum benefit out of any investment we're putting in the area. But what I will have to say to the board just now is this isn't the end game for the maternity services. This is always a medium term till we're able to get the whole of the Raigmore campus programmed up, and then you would have a fully compliant unit. So the biggest issue before was how do we make a limited space as best compliant as we can and try and capture as much as we possibly can within the footprint. So we're extending on the level 2 on a cantilever construction, which will allow us to extend on the second level. We weren't able to do a 2-storey extension due to underground cabling, and obviously probably it would have been cost prohibited as well. So we're trying to make the best out of what we've got there. The consultation was long. We had to make some sacrifices, but I think over the time now we've managed to resolve it all, which has been great. We've listened to everyone from all the different colleagues in the different departments that's utilising the service, but we also got some of the lived experience surveys from our Together with Care survey, and we're allowed to make sure that met needs for our patients as well as our staff. Just a quick run through, we're going to have 15 compliant cot spaces within the neonatal unit. We'll have 7 compliant delivery rooms. If anybody is aware, we currently don't have any ensuite facilities within them, so it's quite degrading for the women. But after giving birth, they have to walk up a corridor to the toilet, and that I was up there on Friday myself and seen it firsthand. So that will be a major improvement. We've also managed to give them as much space as possible for additional things that will help the patient along. So one of the big key things was at the neonates area, you couldn't come, a woman in her bed couldn't come along to see her child because the corridor was too tight. So again, that meant that the woman who would probably be in a lot of pain herself with something to come off beds and onto a wheelchair to then get into a unit, which she was sitting with another 4 mums in a confined space area. So these are all the major improvements as a board we need to recognise that will allow us to continue with the care. It's going to be a challenge, development. I think we've got nine phases within it, because we're having to decant. We've no major decant facility. We've created one decant space that we're going to allow us to do daycare in, which we'll kick off with, but the rest of it will be phased moves. We've got all that agreed. We've got all the design agreed. We're out to market testing with it, and we're ready to go as soon as the approval goes through. And I take the opportunity on Friday to take a colleague along for Scottish Government, the capital, who looks after the capital investment group, to see what we're currently working in. And he was shocked, to say the least, in some of the things that he seen. But the good bit for it was every staff member he spoke to advised how much they'd been involved in the process and how much they were looking forward to getting this new facility. And they were also advising, they know that it will be hard in regards to the decant nap, but it says that the end game's far better than some disturbances as we go through the profile. So it was all really good to hear. And I think they're now getting the reality that they're going to get something that is no 100% what a new one would be, but as good as we could possibly get for them, to allow them to work in a far better infrastructure. So that's just from me. I'm happy to open up to the board now, and any questions for Catherine or the rest of the team.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks Tracy and Rashmi and Isla as well for taking us through that. It's evident there's been a huge amount of work has gone into this, and I think you've done a great job at capturing the need, the ambition, but also the challenges that are involved in this piece of work. I can see that several colleagues want to come in, so I'm going to take Pam first.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, really great to be taken through the business case in the way that we've been taken through it, pulling out the quality, pulling out the ethos, pulling out the work, and giving us a real sense, I think, of the commitment to this and the possibilities out of it. One question I had, I think that the board would be interested in, is around Argyll and Bute. So Argyll and Bute obviously is delegated, and however, as an NHS, we have our duties around the delivery of those maternity services across the whole patch. And I guess just as we're working closely with our grandparent partners to try and ensure we've got all the right support and network around them, I'm keen to understand the Argyll and Bute aspect within this. Obviously a very successful model with Greater Glasgow and Clyde, but we also know we've got to keep an eye on these interfaces as the pressures continue everywhere. So I'm keen to just not lose the fact that NHS Highland is Argyll and Bute as well, and that whilst there's been a focus on, I guess, building up what's needed in the north, that network and some of those specialist posts, I would imagine, would be have a duty to provide the appropriate support to Argyll and Bute as well. But I just want some clarity on that. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. If I just come back on that, Chair, if I could, I'm going to bring Isla in. Obviously, this is about us understanding different models of service delivery. The pathways in Argyll and Bute obviously point to Glasgow and work with a slightly different receiving team. So I'll bring Isla in, because some of the rules that are proposed in the business case will help facilitate some of that. Isla, if I could bring you in on that one, please.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Pam, for that question. So certainly within my role, I have board-wide responsibilities. So I was in North Highland and Argyll and Bute, and so I work closely with the teams across Highland, and we're working very much to to develop and enhance those professional working relationships. So from an Argyll and Bute perspective, interestingly, they are in a very different position from North Highland from a workforce perspective. You know, they don't have challenges recruiting to their teams. They are, you know, they have their full staffing complement, and they have their 5 birth units. So yes, there's absolutely parts of the roles that have been outlined in the business case that are going to link Highland wide, because we have the midwifery-led care there. I think Louise and I are going to be meeting with Fiona Davies in the near future just to explore what those professional structures look like within Argyll and Bute, and tying that in across Highland. So, as I say, at the moment, there are certainly Highland-wide structures professionally for midwifery teams. We are working on enhancing those relationships, working more closely together. And the roles will evolve, as I say, across Pan Highland. I also have close working relationships with the Director of Midwifery in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, so those communication channels work well. It's a very supportive group, actually, the Directors of Midwifery across Scotland. So those channels are very much, you know, whether it's Katie in Grampian or whether it's Mary in GGC, those communication channels work really well.
Thanks, Isla. And before I bring other colleagues in with their questions, I just actually wanted to add to that, because Pam stole my question, but I am going to add a little bit to that. So I have had the pleasure of being a customer of both the maternity services in Rigmore for some of my children, but I've also accessed the maternity pathways from Argyll and Bute, you know, both my midwife care locally and then accessing Greater Glasgow and Clyde for some other parts of my care. And I think Tracy touched on earlier in her part of the presentation that, you know, this is a really important development for us as a board, and it will be high profile. People will be very interested in this, of course, and I think as well as that kind of those closer and more aligned relationships that you've talked about, Isla, with our colleagues in Glasgow, but also in Argyll and Bute, and kind of pulling that all in appropriately. I think we also need to be mindful of our messaging and how we present this publicly into our staff. And sometimes that can be really small things, like how we refer to things in papers. You know, we talk about, oh, you know, things being for the whole of NHS Highland, but actually we maybe mean it's the north, and some of it will be whole of the board area. So I think just as we move forward, there'll be a lot of interest in this, and I think we just need to be mindful of how we present that, so that we're not causing confusion, and so that people are not feeling that they have been forgotten about, maybe if they're very far away from the hub in Inverness. But actually, Fiona Davies just whipped her hand up there. Fiona, did you want to come in on this particular point?
Yes, please, Chair. It would seem odd not to, really, wouldn't it? And I just wanted to thank Catherine for presenting this substantial report this morning, and all of the contributors. But also just to thank you, Isla, for those comments, really, in terms of your observation of the things that are working well for us in Argyll and Bute. And it's a service I'm really proud of in terms of what we are able to achieve in our particular remote and rural context. And really that's kind of predicated on the relationships, as you described, between ourselves and Glasgow that have been built up over a long period of time, where there's a good deal of clinical trust about managing risks, and close alignment of pathways and decision making, so that we can support women who are able to deliver within Argyll to do so at their choice, and those that wish to go to Glasgow or need to go to Glasgow are able to do that too, but get their pre and post care as close to home as possible. So it's really lovely to hear that. I'm really keen to meet with you and Louise to see how these roles that you're identifying in this business case can augment and add to our arrangements. As Sarah said, you know, it's coming alongside and working together in that collaboration that I think will be advantageous to us. So yeah, really looking forward to that. and just so pleased to hear this piece of work being progressed for the board.
Thanks, Fiona. Isla, did you want to come back on that before I bring Alex in?
Thank you. I suppose it was really just to add that I know there have been, there's been a real focus on the conversations in that sort of networked model between Aberdeen, Dr. Gray's and Inverness. But I think, the conversation we're having here in terms of the Argyll and Bute context, we also need to be very mindful of our other sites in North Highland too, that it's not seen to be Inverness centric either. So I think, we have Caithness, we have Skye, we have Fort William, we've got the Loch Aber redesign going on. So I think, it is very much taking that pan-Highland approach and not thinking that this is, as I say, but yes, there are parts of this which are very specific to Raigmore in terms of the refurb and the alongside unit. But in terms of the staffing complement, the developments, the governance, all of that is very much a pan-Highland way forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Isla. That's reassuring to hear. Okay, Alex has been waiting patiently, so I'll bring Alex in and then Louise after that.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks for that. And thanks, Ellie, for that reassurance, because one of the issues we've got, I live in Caithness, and chat have obviously been jumping up and down about this is going to finish in maternity in Caithness. Of course, it isn't, but that's what they're saying. So we've got to handle public expectations. I'm sorry, my builder is outside and has just started up his bloody machine, but never mind. I'll go as quick as I can. Alan, looking at the project programme on page 30, I think it is, it sounds very challenging because you've got that multi-phase approach. Your critical path, I would suspect, would be long because you won't have many chances to do much in parallel. You'll be doing it all. You do that phase, then you do the next phase, then you do the next phase. How challenging is the 2 years that you've got there, and how realistic is it? Thanks.
No, I think the programme's quite generous in regards to the 2 years. I think we'll be comfortable in achieving it within that, Alex. Just through the experience that the team's got in delivering when they've done the theatres, they've just looked at it, and it's the same architect and the company that is doing it, Kears, are working on the site just now, so they're aware of the structure of the building. We're doing asbestos work, we're doing fire stopping, so I think we've got really good knowledge of it. The bit that we have to watch is when we start doing one of the decants, we start the work, do we find something, or is it too noisy in an area, and then you've got neonates are going into areas, that until we actually get into it, we'll not know how well it'll work. So like the neonates have got to utilise the theatre, and then we'll be utilising other theatres and that. So there's quite a bit of time being put in there just to make sure that it allows for that, Alec. But I wouldn't like to think it would go anywhere out with that time frame. It's in that indicative programme, because that was just indicative for the main contractor. We've not got the subcontractors on board yet, so I would like to think we could tighten it up a wee bit.
Thank you, Alan. And I've got Louise next, please.
Thanks. And just to add to the Argyll and Bute theme, when I was down there a couple of weeks ago for the week, I was proudly shown all 5 of those birthing areas. Who knew there were so many different shapes of birthing pool? And certainly the team won the Team of the Year at the Argyll and Bute Awards, which was great. So really, really good basis to work on, and how we get the teams across Highland and Argyll and Bute with that same cross-working view of the world, really, because I think there's definitely opportunities to get that developed as we go forward. And certainly one of the areas that I think we've got the opportunity to do now is look at what are we going to measure that makes a difference from this case. We've talked about it in this meeting, but how are we actually going to do that? So in 3 months, 6 months post doing the development work that we need to do, what is going to be different for the families, what's going to be the measures that we as a board can look at and say, yes, that's really made a difference to what we do for our communities.
Thanks, Louise. I think that's a really important question for us to hold in our heads as this progresses. Okay, I've got Tracy next.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to come back to Alex's point in terms of our continued work, collaboration with our community-led groups, which is key, important in terms of taking the business case forward. So certainly the Directorate, the Women and Child Health Directorate, now has a regular meeting with the chat group. Actually, the first meeting takes place later this afternoon. So certainly, again, it's about that continued engagement, but that collaboration, that joint working with our community-led groups. So it's just to provide that level of assurance to the board. And I suppose I can come to Louise's point in terms of milestones, but measures. And certainly that's the more detailed work that we need to get into in terms of the team coming together to develop and obviously to share that. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. That's helpful. Okay, I've got Graham next, please.
Thanks. Isla, I think you mentioned the word alignment. The services were really just being brought into line with what would be available nationally. So my question is really about the additional both capital and revenue costs that this is going to incur. And is it your feeling then that if indeed we are just aligning and trying to bring things up to a decent physical standard, that we'll be pushing at an open door for the money? I know there was also significant ministerial involvement in this, but whether that helps or hinders, we don't know. But it's certainly been an issue across, obviously across the population areas in the north. So I'm just trying to get a feel of, you know, how the financial ask is, how you think it's going to be received. Thanks.
So I think I saw Alan and Pam pop their hands up there, so I think they might be wanting to come in on this. So, oh, and Catherine as well. So I'll take Alan. Alan was first off the mark. So when you go, Alan.
Yeah, in regards to the capital side of things, the actual facilities and how run down the facilities are in that, Graham, it probably pushes the door open itself. You're never pushing an open door, but at the same time, you know, you have to make sure that you've got the business case, you know, meeting all the salient points, and you're not just, you know, running away with spending millions of pounds that you could have done something for a cheaper version and that. So I think we've done the due diligence of it. And as I said, when I walked around with my colleague for Scottish Government, you know, he can understand why we're needing the money, and he understands that in the grand scheme of it, 5 million compared to the hundreds of millions other boards are asking for to do different things, I think we'll be in a good place for it. But the revenue side, I've not been involved, so hopefully Pam or Catherine will help you with the revenue bit.
Thank you, Alan. Pam?
Yeah, so I think what the business case sets out is the revenue as we see it, having done all the work and the justification as to why that level of investment is required, which is what we were asked to do. If you remember, we had a previous earlier business case that set out not dissimilar levels of requirement, and we're working collectively, both Grampian and ourselves, with Scottish Government around the level of investment required. You'll remember that we have been given some release for what we thought we needed for this year, and to both health boards, and we're working closely and making sure that the deployment of that's right, because I guess the other bit that we have to consider is, so this is what it will take for where we are in the here and now to get to where we need to be. But in a network model, as the clinicians work together, they may choose to think of deploying that differently depending on how things move forward. So they've given us the kind of best starting point in terms of being able to deliver what the ask is from the Raith Roberts report and the subsequent changes to moving towards Model 6 for Grampian, and the context of Highland getting to a better place and being able to be part of that network. So my view is that what you're getting today is what we think that would take, and that is justified within the business case, and that those discussions will then continue, and negotiations both with Grampian and with Scottish Government, and you know, the kind of message was one of supporting us to get to the right place, but obviously it's not an insignificant ask, and therefore in the current national context I'm sure those discussions will not just be there you go. It'll be a case of working through I guess that again another level of diligence and agreement that's right. So far the support and the I guess the investment that we've had has been really positive.
Thanks, Pam. And I suppose that rounds us off quite nicely to why it's here with us today. So we are being asked to approve this report to be submitted to the Scottish Government, and that will, as Pam has described, allow that process to move forward, and on the understanding that that will obviously be an iterative process and there'll be lots more discussions to come after that. So I'm not seeing any other hands up, so just to recap, we are being asked to take moderate assurance from this report and approve it for the submission to Scottish Government. Are members happy to do that? Okay. Great, thank you very much. So we're going to take a short comfort break now. I'll ask for your forgiveness, we are a little bit over time. I'm going to suggest that we come back here at 11:20, so a 10-minute break for us to get refreshed and ready for our IPQR. So I'll see you in 10 minutes.